Let the stories carry you into sleep. I hadn't even taken off my sandals. The wind chime above the Carter house still made the same hollow sound it did when I was 10, only this time it didn't sound like home, it sounded like warning. Mr. Quiet stood at the head of the table, red-faced, fists clenched so tight his knuckles looked like broken porcelain. Miss Leon was behind him, arms folded like a judge who had already written the sentence. "You think working in cafes with a laptop makes you important?" he snarled. "You're nothing but uneducated trash polluting this family." The words didn't land, they pierced. "And Miss Leon?" She didn't flinch. She nodded slowly, like she'd been waiting years to say nothing in the most devastating way. It was supposed to be a quiet dinner. I brought a bottle of wine. I wore the old sweater Miss Leon liked, just in case she noticed. I had updates to share, small wins, promising deals, maybe even a little pride. But they didn't come for conversation. They came to destroy the version of me they couldn't control. "You'll come crawling back," Mr. Quiet hissed. "You always do." The room held its breath. The ceiling fan hummed like static. I looked at them, their smugness, the worn dining room I once painted, the family photos where my face was cropped smaller each year, and I felt something unexpected. Not sadness, not rage, clarity. I stood up, tucked in my chair, reached for my purse, and whispered just one word, "Okay." Their laughter followed me down the hall, sharp and gleeful. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't need to. Because while they thought I was walking out in shame, I was actually stepping into power. And what they never realized, what they still don't know, is that sometimes the girl you push out is the one building the kingdom you'll one day beg to enter. They thought I walked out with nothing but pride and a purse. They were wrong. That night, I didn't check into a motel. I didn't crash on a friend's couch. I went home. Home was a modern, glass-walled, beachfront estate in Florida, where the ocean doesn't yell, it listens. As Mr. Quiet pointed to the door and called me trash, I had just signed an $8.5 million contract. And that scam cafe job they mocked? It was the cover story while I negotiated equity stakes, structured fintech platforms, and co-founded a startup now valued at over $350 million. I had a team of engineers across time zones. I had 2 CTOs who used to teach at Stanford. I had lawyers who made Wall Street lean forward. And none of them cared I didn't have a degree. They cared that I could build. And I built quietly because I'd learned that the loudest rooms are often the ones that never wanted me in them to begin with. In the mornings, I drank imported coffee made by someone who actually smiled at me. At night, I reviewed investor reports beside floor-to-ceiling windows, barefoot, powerful, and finally unobserved. I didn't post about it, I didn't brag, I didn't text Emily or send photos to prove anything because I had nothing left to prove. But silence has its own kind of roar. And when you go from being ignored to being undeniable, when your bank app needs 2-step verification because the zeros won't fit on one screen, you start to realize they didn't exile you. They accidentally set you free. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to be proud. I just needed them to stay exactly where they were so they could watch everything they said I'd never do happen without them. It took exactly 21 days, 3 weeks after Mr. Quiet threw me out like a broken chair, after Miss Lean crossed her arms and labeled me uneducated trash, they called. Not to apologize, but because their world had collapsed. Their accounts were frozen, the house was flagged for foreclosure. The financial advisor who once praised their retirement stability had gone dark. Turns out he was being investigated for fraud. The first call came in as a blocked number on a Thursday, then another, and another. By Sunday, my voicemail was a graveyard of half-hearted, "Camille, please, we need to talk." They didn't even remember my name had changed. Ava Reed, the woman they refused to see. I didn't answer. I was too busy, not just in schedule, but in spirit. Busy watching sunrise spill across white marble floors, busy negotiating a Series B funding round, busy breathing in silence that didn't demand I shrink to fit. Then they showed up. Security buzzed while I was coming back from yoga. "Mum," the concierge said, "there's an older couple downstairs. They claim they're your parents." I paused, then smiled faintly. "Tell them I'm not available, and please remind them this building does not permit unapproved guests." 10 minutes later, I watched the lobby footage. There stood Mr. Quiet, pacing like he was trapped in a cage of his own pride. Miss Lynn dabbed her eyes, real tears or remembered tactics. I couldn't tell. They didn't look like parents. They looked like people who'd just realized the bottom rung of the ladder they kicked me off was now higher than anything they could reach. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just whispered to myself, "You told me to get out," and I did. But what they never expected, what they still couldn't understand, was that the door they slammed in my face was made of glass. The next message came through my lawyer. "Miss Reed," Mr. Grant said, his tone cautious, "we've been contacted by your parents' financial advisor, Mr. Douglas. They're asking if you'd consider a temporary loan, just until they stabilize." I didn't laugh. I didn't flinch. I simply looked out at the Atlantic, calm and endless, and said, "Send them my rates, business only." There was a pause. Then the quiet click of understanding. Because this wasn't personal anymore. They made sure of that the day Mr. Quiet called me garbage, the day Miss Lien nodded in silence, agreeing with every word. They had removed the daughter. Now, all that remained was the CEO. I didn't reply to their voicemails. I didn't return their letters. Instead, I reviewed property blueprints for a second estate in Destin. All cash, ocean view, not a single corner touched by the past. Forgiveness? Yes, I had found that. But forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It doesn't mean unlocking doors you once had to rebuild with your bare hands. They wanted help, but not from Ava, the woman I'd fought to become. They wanted something from Camille, the soft-spoken girl they could belittle, control, and forget when convenient. She's gone. She left the moment she realized survival is not about pleasing people who are comfortable watching you shrink. And in her place now stands someone different. Someone who doesn't write checks out of guilt. Someone who doesn't bleed to make others feel whole. Someone who learned that kindness without boundaries becomes currency for abuse. Later that week, Mr. Grant followed up again. "They've seen the media coverage," he said. "The article, the interviews, the valuation numbers. They want to speak directly now." I said nothing for a long time, then finally replied, "Direct access costs more than they can afford. Because when you've spent your entire life being undervalued, the greatest revenge is never cruelty. It's clarity wrapped in silence." It started with a headline. "From College Dropout to FinTech Queen, The Rise of Ava Reed," written by Sophie Lynn. 6 full pages, and one clean, bold photo. Me, barefoot on the marble deck of my Florida beach house, wind in my hair, coffee mug in hand. The mug said one thing: self-funded. By noon, my inbox exploded. Former bosses who once called me unrealistic wanted to reconnect. Classmates who mocked my startup obsession sent congratulations with links to coffee spots. Even 2 exes who ghosted me when I was broke suddenly just wanted to catch up. But I didn't care about the crowd. I cared about the silence, the kind that came from the people who knew me longest and still couldn't say one word: proud. Emily Reed screenshot the family group chat. Miss Lean had written, "Why would she go so public? This is embarrassing." Mr. Quiet replied, "She's doing it for attention. She always was dramatic." And just like that, it hit me. Even now, even after the world stood to clap, they still refused to see me. Not the headlines, not the cover, not the empire I built while they whispered I'd fail. Because to admit I succeeded would mean confronting the version of themselves that watched me rise from nothing and did nothing. I didn't respond. I didn't send them the article. Why would I share the proof with people who wouldn't believe the process? Later that night, I hosted a private dinner. 10 guests, investors, friends, founders who bet on me before the world noticed. We toasted not to money, but to memory, to the ones who stayed when I had nothing to give, to the ones who never flinched when I said I was building something big. Someone asked, "Would you ever let them back in?" I paused, smiled, and replied, "I'd rather dine with strangers who respected the blueprint than sit with family who mocked the foundation." Because the truth is, some people only clap when you're small enough to control, and I didn't shrink to fit their applause. It arrived in a padded envelope. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. Miss Lien always wrote in large, round letters, 2 sizes too big, like she needed the world to hear her even in silence. I sat at my kitchen island, glass of lemon water in hand, Florida light pouring in through the windows. The moment I unfolded the letter, I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't ownership. It began, "Ava, we just want to start over. Life is short. We'd love to visit. Maybe see the beach house sometime." That was it. No mention of being called a mistake. No acknowledgement of being thrown out like I never mattered. Just soft nostalgia, veiled guilt, and a quiet request to stand inside the empire they once laughed at. I folded the letter once, then again, and again, and I dropped it into the shredder. Because what they didn't understand was this. You don't get to disown someone and then ask for a tour of the palace they built from the ruins of your rejection. They didn't want to see me. They wanted to witness what I'd built, as if proximity could erase the past they refused to name. And the truth? And they weren't curious. They were calculating. I could feel it in every word that tiptoed around responsibility. They thought that if they softened their tone enough, if they sounded just sad enough, I'd open the door they once slammed with finality. But I've learned forgiveness is internal, access is earned. And Miss Lien, she wanted the view, not the story. Later that night, I stood on the balcony, wind brushing against my skin, ocean humming below. The lights inside glowed warm, earned. Everything around me, every tile, every window, every breath, was mine. Not inherited, not gifted, built. And from that height, it became clear. They weren't knocking out of love, they were knocking out of envy. I opened my laptop that Sunday afternoon with the kind of focus only clarity can buy. The ocean outside was calm, my phone was quiet, and I was ready. The cursor blinked in a blank email draft for a full minute before I started typing. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally knew exactly how to say it. Subject line, closure. Dear Mr. Quiet and Miss Lien, I'm truly sorry for the situation you're facing, but this is the life you told me I didn't deserve, the one you dismissed, mocked, refused to acknowledge while I was building it brick by digital brick. I want you to know something very important. I forgive you, but forgiveness does not include access. You will not be part of this chapter because you tore out every page that could have included you. This is not revenge, it's reality. I wish you healing, truly, but from a distance. Ava, no tears, no shaking hands, no final glances. I hit send and felt still. Because healing doesn't always look like reunions. Sometimes it's one clean, final line that draws a boundary so sharp no one dares cross it again. The next day, Emily Reed called. Her voice was soft, unfamiliar. "Dad's not doing well," she said. "Mom hasn't been sleeping. They didn't think it would go this far." I didn't interrupt. "I'm not asking you to forget," she added. "Just maybe help them stay afloat." I waited, then asked, calmly, if they hadn't lost everything, would they have ever reached out? She didn't answer, because we both knew they didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that paid bills quietly, that showed up with flowers after being treated like a burden, that absorbed the impact so they didn't have to change. But that girl, she doesn't live here anymore. Now there's just me, Ava Reed. Not the daughter they wanted, but the woman they needed. And this woman builds gates, not bridges. It's been 6 months, no voicemails, no letters, no unannounced visits from people who once shouted me out of their lives. Just silence. And for the first time, that silence doesn't ache. It sings. Each morning, I wake up to light spilling across my sheets, the sound of the ocean breathing against the glass walls I designed myself. There are no raised voices here, no shame disguised as tradition, only space, honest, earned, unshakable. In 6 months, I've opened 2 new companies, funded 5 women-led startups, launched a scholarship program for girls like I once was, brilliant, overlooked, told to stay quiet. I don't attend family functions, I don't check the old group chats, and I don't scroll through their lives like someone looking through a locked window, because I'm not on the outside anymore. I'm not waiting to be invited in. I built the house, I bought the land, and I wrote my name on the title, without their permission and without their applause. Sometimes people ask, "Do you ever regret cutting them off?" Here's what I tell them. Loneliness is waking up in a house where your voice doesn't matter. Peace is waking up in a home you built with your own hands, where every corner whispers, "You did this." And no, I don't miss the people who only loved me when I was easy to ignore. I don't miss earning smiles by shrinking myself. They wanted a daughter who stayed small, who came back, who broke herself to rebuild what they refused to carry, but I didn't break. I became. Now, when I pass the mirror, I don't see damage, I see design. And if they ever drive past this home, this quiet fortress of soft light and louder legacy, they'll realize something too late. They didn't just lose a daughter. They lost the only person who would have carried them through the storm. Thanks for listening. If this story helped you unwind, don't forget to like and subscribe channel Reddit Stories to Fall Asleep too. There's a new tale waiting for you every night, right here. Sleep well.